Today's video is my version of some of the mid-year tags that I've been seeing and enjoying across BookTube recently. So not for me a kind of freak out video or a best books of 2017. I'm just going to cut straight to the chase and I'm going to tell you about my favourite book of the year so far. And because I gave it 5 stars, I'm going to give you 5 reasons on why I think you should read it. And that book is Golden Hill by Frances Bufford. The book takes place in 1746 and it tells the story of the ambiguously named Mr. Smith, who arrives on the shores of Manhattan with a promissory note and ideas of adventure. He certainly avails himself of everything that the fledgling USA has to offer and engages in business deals and romance and theatricals and fights and duels and much more besides. The first reason why I think you should give this one a go is that it's a very different kind of historical fiction. So I'm by no means a historical fiction expert, but I've read enough over the years to kind of get a flavour for the kind of historical book that I like. I love writers such as Sarah Waters, Sarah Perry, Sarah Moss, all the Sarahs. And I think what they do really well is present a historical setting in a very contemporary way, by which I mean that they obviously research their work and it's very detailed and their characters are very much in keeping with the time, but the prose is contemporary and it's a lot like watching a high budget BBC period drama to me. This is a fantastic way of kind of highlighting the eternal nature of the human condition. Bufford does something very different here. This book reads as if it was actually written in the 18th century. I'm no 18th century buff. In fact, when I thought about it, the only book I can recall enjoying written during that time is Fanny Hill by John Cleland. I think largely considered to be one of the first pornographic novels widely published in Great Britain. So that probably tells you more than you need to know about me. But beyond that, I couldn't even think of many famous 18th century writers apart from maybe Swift, because a lot of classical writing that we talk about these days is 19th century or much earlier. Bufford is an academic and this shows in his prose. So the syntax here, the sentence length, the vocabulary, all reads as if rather than watching a period drama, you've jumped into a time machine and travelled back to that time, or at least found a dusty old tome that was written several hundred years ago. But within that, there is some kind of linguistic sorcery going on. Now, I'm not qualified enough to kind of put my finger on exactly what that is, but there is something contemporary in not only the themes, but within the language, as Bufford makes this writing so accessible to a modern audience. It's stupidly impressive. The second reason why I think you should read this is the pace. So quite often literary fiction gets a reputation as being more character driven and slow. I have friends that prefer pacier reads and they tend to opt for more populist fiction, and it sometimes feels a bit like the Sharks and the Jets that you either go for character or plot. But this book goes to show that you can have it all. Bufford's characters are well drawn, but I'll come on to that in a minute. What really stands out here is the pacey nature of this book. There is no downtime. There is something happening all the time. It is a completely compulsive page turner from beginning to end. The end itself is completely and utterly satisfying, tying up all loose ends and leaving you with that warm glow despite being a little bit sad that it's over. The third reason I think you should read this is the humorous tone. So again, I sometimes worry that we lose our sense of humour a little bit in serious fiction. I've spoken before about how much I value humour in all areas of my life really, but finding a genuinely funny book is quite a rare thing. This made me laugh out loud, an overused phrase I know, but I mean it seriously here. There are some scenes of true hilarity. At one point, I think it's on Pope's Day, so around November time, Smith gets into an altercation with some locals that leads to a chase through the streets of the fledgling New York. It was just, I don't want to give too much away, it was absolutely hilarious. Later on, the narrator of the book, whose identity isn't revealed until the end, tries to explain a very complicated card game and then loses track and just gives up. Has you laughing out loud even though you haven't really got a clue what's going on. Fourth reason I think you should read this book is because of the time and place where it was written. So this is set in, well, specifically New York, but in a US which is pre-independence and in very much its infancy. And what a fascinating time it was. They didn't even have real money. They just had all these hodgepodge bits of coins and paper with which to deal as currency. So it was fascinating learning about what was a relatively small, underdeveloped town at the time. Smith compares it to the metropolis of London of his birth, and it comes off rather unfavourably. But what you do see here are flashes of the tenacity and confidence and kind of get up and go of the characters, which represent contemporary America to me even now. So it's really interesting to see how what we understand as the USA started off in these literary roots. Reason number 5, by no means the least important, are the characters in this book. So I mentioned before that even though it's pacey, the characters are well drawn, and there are so many people here to fall in love with. Smith himself is a very engaging guy, but Septimus, his best friend, his kind-hearted friend, absolutely stole my heart. It's just an adorable character. But we also have Tabitha, the spiky love interest, who's a strong, independent in as much as she could be at that time woman, clearly frustrated at the constraints of the female role back in the 18th century. Banter, although I hate that word, between Smith and Tabitha is really, really interesting to read. It put me in mind of some of Shakespeare's feistiest romances, and there are references to that throughout the book. The character of Turpie, who's a 40-something incredibly voluptuous actress who has little more than a cameo role in the book, was such a humorous character, and one with which I identify just a little bit. In short, you absolutely must read this book. If you like historical fiction, if you like a pacey romp, if you like good characters, guys, if you just like reading, I would recommend you give it a go. I know that some people across BookTube have already read it. I've seen really mixed reviews, which surprises me. I know that some people also love it. If you have read it, tell me underneath what you thought of it. And if you haven't, tell me if you're going to give it a go. That's all from me. I'll see you next time. Bye.